The sensor array blinked red 3 times before Riv even understood what he was seeing. His small cargo hauler, the Sweetwater, had been cutting through the empty space near the Outer Veil Nebula for 2 weeks without incident. This route was lonely but profitable. Most traders avoided it because of the stellar radiation, but Riv had upgraded his shields last season. The solitude never bothered him. He actually preferred it to the crowded trade lanes where every ship wanted to chat or gossip. But now his screens showed something that should not exist here. The computer kept recalculating, rejecting its own readings, trying again. Mass signature too large, dimensions impossible. The system finally gave up and just displayed the raw data with a small error message underneath. Riv tapped the screen twice, hoping it was a malfunction. The numbers stayed the same. Whatever floated out there in the dark registered as big as a small moon. He ran a thermal scan. The object was cold, mostly dormant, with only a few scattered heat signatures. Debris from some ancient civilization, maybe. The Quellan historical records mentioned a species that built massive space habitats before their sun died. Perhaps this was a remnant. Curiosity pulled at him. His cargo of spices and fabrics would not spoil if he took a short detour. Riv adjusted his course and activated the long-range visual sensors. It took several minutes for the image to resolve. When it did, his 3-fingered hands froze over the controls. This was no ancient habitat. This was a ship, a warship, the biggest warship Riv had ever seen or heard about in all his 42 years of trading across 7 systems. It stretched out like a city built for destruction. Weapon batteries lined its hull in rows. Massive engines sat dark and cold at the rear. Armor plating thick enough to shrug off asteroids covered every surface. Whoever built this thing had not been thinking about exploration or trade. They had been thinking about war. The design was unfamiliar. Not Torvin, not Hynari, not any collective species Riv recognized. His mind raced through possibilities until a cold realization settled in his stomach. The ship matched descriptions from the monitoring reports. The ones his government tried to keep quiet. The ones about the species everyone feared but had never met. Humans. For 60 years, the collective network had been intercepting radio signals from a small blue planet on the edge of explored space. The signals painted a picture of a violent, aggressive species constantly at war with itself. They destroyed their own environment, created weapons of unimaginable power, and competed viciously over resources. Every species in the collective had agreed on one thing. When humans reached the stars, they would come as conquerors. And now here sat their largest war machine, drifting in the void like a sleeping predator. Riv should have run. Protocol demanded he report this to the collective immediately and flee at maximum speed. But something felt wrong about the scene. The ship was too quiet, running on minimal power, almost hiding. If humans were the aggressive invaders everyone feared, why would their first ship into collective space be lurking in an empty nebula with its weapons cold? He edged closer. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but Riv had not become a successful trader by following every rule. Sometimes the biggest profits came from taking calculated risks. Sometimes the most interesting discoveries happened when you went toward the mystery instead of running away. The Sweetwater crept forward, covering a kilometer every few minutes. Riv kept his shields at maximum and his distress beacon ready to trigger. If this went badly, at least the collective would know what happened. His sensors swept across the massive hull, picking up details. Blasts scoring on some armor plates. Signs of repair work. Docking bays large enough to swallow his entire ship. This vessel had seen combat before. He was less than 500 meters away when everything changed. The human warship suddenly blazed to life. Running lights flickered on in sequence down its entire length. Sensor arrays swiveled toward the Sweetwater. Weapon systems powered up with an audible hum that Riv could hear through his hull. His cockpit filled with alarm sounds as his computer detected targeting locks from at least 20 different systems. Riv grabbed the controls to run, but his hands would not obey. Terror locked his muscles. This was it. First contact with humanity would be his last moment alive. They would vaporize him without a second thought, and the collective would find only debris as a warning. Then his communication panel chimed. An incoming transmission. His translator struggled with the signal for a moment, producing garbled static and broken syllables. Then a voice came through, speaking Quellan with an accent but clear enough to understand. "Please do not run. We mean no harm. Our translator is still learning." Riv stared at the speaker, unable to process the words. They spoke his language. They were asking him not to run. Nothing about this matched what he expected. His voice cracked when he finally managed to respond. "You are human." A pause. Then the voice came back, and Riv thought he detected something like sadness in it. "Yes, we are human. We know you have heard things about us. We know you are afraid. We would like to explain. Will you give us that chance?" Every piece of training said no. Every survival instinct said no. Every report from the collective said no. But Riv looked at his sensors again. The weapons were powered but not aimed. The targeting locks had actually released. And buried in that strange request was something he had not expected to hear from humanity's first starship. A plea. "Your docking bay is opening," Riv heard himself say. "Yes, an invitation, not a demand. You can leave any time, but we hope you will come inside and talk with us. We have waited a long time to meet someone." Riv's hands moved across the controls before his brain caught up with the decision. The Sweetwater turned slowly toward the massive docking bay entrance, flying toward either the biggest mistake of his life or the most important moment in galactic history. 6 months earlier, the Leviathan had left Earth orbit under a sky crowded with watching eyes. Every major nation wanted representatives aboard. Every space agency wanted their instruments installed. Every military wanted assurances that humanity's largest vessel would not be used for conquest. Captain Lynn Hayes remembered the weight of all those expectations as she walked through the final pre-launch checks. The ship had been built over 12 years in lunar orbit, assembled from components manufactured across 3 continents and 2 orbital stations. Its original purpose was purely defensive. When the engineers discovered those radio signals from distant star systems, when the linguists partially decoded messages that suggested an entire galactic community existed beyond human space, the governments of Earth made a choice. They would send their most powerful ship not as a weapon, but as a promise. "We can defend ourselves if needed, but we hope that will not be necessary." Hayes had been chosen for her record, 20 years in the Navy, but also degrees in anthropology and conflict resolution. The selection committee wanted someone who understood both strength and restraint, someone who would not fire first but would not hesitate to protect her crew, someone who saw the mission for what it truly was, humanity's one chance to prove they were not the monsters their own radio signals suggested. Dr. David Webb had spent 4 of those 6 months building translation algorithms. The signals they intercepted were complex, layered with references and context that made direct translation nearly impossible. But Webb was patient. He fed the computer thousands of hours of broadcasts, looking for patterns in grammar and syntax. He made educated guesses about phonetics and meaning. By the time the Leviathan reached the Outer Veil Nebula, his programs could produce rough translations in 17 different alien languages. First Officer Roy Bennett had not liked the plan from the beginning. He said so during every senior staff meeting. Using the Leviathan for first contact was like sending a tank to a peace negotiation. No matter what they said or how they acted, the aliens would see the weapons first, and the intentions never. Hayes understood his concerns but disagreed with his conclusions. Better to be honest about their capabilities than to hide them. Better to show strength and choose not to use it than to appear weak and be dismissed. The Sweetwater came through the docking bay doors like a nervous animal entering a cave. Hayes watched from the observation deck as the small alien vessel settled onto the landing pad. It was maybe 30 meters long, cobbled together from mismatched hull plates and outdated engines. Compared to the Leviathan, it looked like a toy. But inside that tiny ship was a living being from another world. The first alien human eyes would see in person. Hayes adjusted her dress uniform one final time. No weapons, no guards with rifles. She had chosen 8 crew members to accompany her, all volunteers, all trained in first contact protocols. They wore formal blues rather than combat gear. They carried translation devices and small gifts from Earth. Webb had suggested bringing things that showed human creativity without human violence. Paintings, music recordings, seeds from plants that produced flowers. The Sweetwater's hatch opened slowly. Atmosphere equalized with a hiss. Then a figure emerged and Hayes saw an alien for the first time. Riv stood maybe 5 feet tall, with gray-blue skin and 3 fingers on each hand. His face had large eyes adapted for low light and a mouth that seemed surprisingly human in its basic structure. He wore practical clothing, something like a jumpsuit, with pockets and tools hanging from a belt. His expression was impossible to read, but his body language screamed fear. He moved like someone expecting an ambush. Hayes stepped forward slowly, keeping her hands visible. Webb had briefed her on Quellan body language. Direct eye contact could be threatening. Sudden movements would trigger flight responses. She needed to project calm confidence without aggression. "Welcome aboard the Leviathan," she said, and her translation device repeated the words in Quellan. "My name is Lynn Hayes. I command this vessel." Riv flinched at her voice but held his ground. His own translator, a small device clipped to his collar, converted his response. "I am Riv of the Quellan Trade Consortium. You speak my language. We have been listening to your people's broadcasts for some time, learning what we could. I apologize if our translator makes mistakes. We are still improving it." That seemed to surprise him. His large eyes blinked twice, a gesture Webb had identified as confusion or recalculation of expectations. "You learned Quellan before making contact. You prepared to speak with us." "Of course, we did not want our first meeting to be full of misunderstandings." Hayes gestured to the team behind her. "These are members of my crew. They wanted to meet you as much as I did. Would you be willing to talk with us? We have prepared a space where you will be comfortable." Riv looked past her at the crew members. A young engineer named Amy Lynn gave a small wave. A medical officer named Dr. Patricia Howard smiled gently. Science Officer Webb practically vibrated with barely contained excitement. None of them looked like the human warriors Riv had expected. They looked curious, hopeful, maybe even nervous. "Your ship is a weapon," Riv said finally. "Why bring a weapon to first contact?" Hayes had known this question would come. She chose her words carefully. "The Leviathan is the only ship we have that could make this journey. Our species is new to deep space. We do not have exploration vessels that can travel this far or sustain a crew for this long, so we brought what we had. Yes, this ship was designed for defense, but today it serves a different purpose. Today it brings humans and aliens together for the first time. We hope that matters more than what the ship can do." Riv studied her face for a long moment. Then he looked back at his own ship, at the docking bay around them, at the massive warship that surrounded them all. Hayes could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the risk assessment, the weighing of fear against curiosity. "You will let me leave if I want to?" he asked. "The moment you ask, no questions, no delays." Another pause. Then Riv took 3 steps forward, closing half the distance between them. "Show me this space you prepared. Let us talk." The meeting room had taken 3 days to prepare. Hayes had assigned a team to research everything they could learn about Quellan biology from intercepted broadcasts. Temperature preferences, atmospheric composition, seating arrangements that would not cause discomfort. When Riv entered, he found a space cooler than the rest of the ship. With lighting adjusted to wavelengths his eyes would find soothing. Low-cushioned platforms instead of human chairs. Even the walls were painted in colors Webb's research suggested Quellen's found calming. Riv noticed everything. He ran his three-fingered hand along the wall, feeling the texture. He tested the cushion, surprised by how it supported his weight at exactly the right firmness. His translator picked up the atmospheric readings and displayed them. Perfect. Better than his own ship in some ways. "You did this for me?" he asked. Hayes nodded. "We wanted you to be comfortable. First impressions matter. We thought starting here was better than starting in some cold metal conference room." They sat together, Hayes and two others on one side, Riv alone on the other. Dr. Webb activated a holographic display between them. Images began cycling through. Radio towers on Earth, satellites, deep space probes, then alien transmissions, Quellen broadcasts, messages from other species. "For 60 years, Webb began, his translator rendering his excitement into Quellen, we have been listening, learning, wondering. We know that you know about us. We know what you heard." Riv's expression shifted to something Hayes recognized as discomfort. The Quellen trader looked down at his hands. "Yes, we have heard your broadcasts. Wars, violence, competition, weapons, horror entertainments. Your species seemed to celebrate conflict." The words hurt more than Hayes expected. She had reviewed those same broadcasts, seeing humanity through alien eyes, wars across every century, news reports focused on disasters and murders, movies about zombies and serial killers and apocalypses, sports where humans crashed into each other for entertainment. Even their music often spoke of pain and anger and destruction. "I understand why you would think that," Hayes said carefully. "Those broadcasts show the truth about humanity. We have done terrible things. We still do terrible things. We fight and hurt and destroy. I will not lie to you about that." Riv looked up, surprised by the admission. "But those broadcasts show only part of the truth," Hayes continued. She nodded to Webb, who changed the display. New images appeared: hospitals, schools, parks, rescue workers pulling people from rubble, volunteers feeding hungry children, scientists working together across borders, musicians performing for crowds of thousands, art museums, libraries, gardens. "We also do this," Hayes said quietly. "We build, we teach, we heal, we create beauty and share it freely. We help strangers without asking for payment. We are not simple, we are not just one thing." Webb brought up more images, historical moments carefully chosen, enemies becoming allies after wars ended, peace treaties, international cooperation, the global response to natural disasters, humans of different backgrounds working side by side, acts of kindness captured by cameras and shared across networks. Riv studied each image carefully. His translator hummed softly as it processed Hayes's words. Finally, he spoke. "Why would you broadcast your violent moments? Why show the galaxy your worst behavior?" "Because we also broadcast everything else," Webb answered. "We do not have one government controlling all transmissions. We do not filter our signals to show only good things. Every human with a radio can send messages into space. Every television station, every internet upload, every satellite call. The galaxy heard everything because we share everything, the good and the bad." That concept seemed to trouble Riv. He shifted on his cushion, thinking. The collective network has rules about broadcasts. We do not send signals that would frighten other species or show our conflicts. We want to appear peaceful and trustworthy. "And you are those things," Hayes said. "But we are working on becoming them. We are still learning, still growing. Maybe in another 100 years our broadcasts will be different, but right now they show who we actually are. Complicated, contradictory, capable of both creation and destruction." First Officer Bennett had been quiet until now. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "You asked why we brought a warship. Here is another answer. We brought it because we are honest about what we can do. This ship can destroy planets. It can fight entire fleets. But we chose not to. We chose to fill it with scientists and artists and teachers instead of soldiers. We chose to use its power to travel and explore instead of conquer. The Leviathan represents a choice. We hope that choice means something. Riv stood suddenly, causing a moment of tension. But he was not fleeing. He approached the holographic display, reaching out to touch the images even though his hand passed through them. How do I know you are telling the truth? How do I know this is not manipulation? You could be showing me what I want to see while hiding your real intentions. It was a fair question. Hayes had no perfect answer. How do you prove sincerity? How do you demonstrate trustworthiness when trust has not yet been established? You are right to doubt us, she admitted. We are strangers, you know our reputation. Words alone cannot change that. She stood as well, approaching Riv carefully. But I can offer you complete transparency. Tour our ship, any section you want to see, talk to any crew member. Access our computer systems with proper security limits. See how we actually live, what we actually do. Judge us by our actions, not our promises. Riv turned to face her fully. They stood close enough now that Hayes could see the intricate patterns in his skin, the subtle movements of his breathing, the intelligence in his large eyes. The collective will want to know about this meeting. They will want to know about you. Then tell them the truth. Whatever you see here, whatever you learn, we have nothing to hide. And if the truth is that humans are as dangerous as we feared. Hayes met his gaze steadily. Then you will have warned your people, and they will be prepared. But I hope you will see something else. I hope you will see people trying very hard not to be the monsters we could have been. The signal reached Quellan space 3 hours after Riv's meeting with Captain Hayes. By the time his encrypted report arrived at the council chambers, it had already been intercepted by at least 6 other species monitoring Quellan communications. Within a day, every member of the collective network knew that humanity had arrived in their space. Worse, they had arrived in a massive warship powerful enough to threaten entire worlds. The Council of Five gathered in emergency session. Riv watched through a holographic link from aboard the Leviathan, knowing his words would determine how 47 species reacted to first contact. Elder Vix spoke first, her gray scales dulled with age but her voice still commanding respect. You claim they are peaceful, yet they bring weapons of conquest. Explain this contradiction. Riv had been preparing his response during the entire flight back to his ship. The contradiction is ours, not theirs. We assumed the size of their weapons meant aggression. But what if it simply means capability? They have power and choose not to use it. Is that not the definition of restraint? The other council members murmured disagreement. Elder Torn activated his own display, showing analysis of the Leviathan's weapon systems captured by Riv's sensors. 24 mass driver cannons, 16 missile batteries, electromagnetic pulse generators, armor thick enough to withstand nuclear explosions. This is not a ship built for restraint. This is a ship built for domination. Riv had expected this argument. They explained why they brought this ship. They have no other vessels capable of crossing the distance. Would you have preferred they arrive in something weak and vulnerable? Would that have made them seem more trustworthy or just more naive? The debate continued for hours. Riv transmitted more footage from his visit, the prepared meeting room, the hospitality, the transparency Captain Hayes offered, but the council remained divided. Half believed Riv's assessment that humans were genuinely attempting peaceful contact. Half believed the humans were simply intelligent enough to disguise their true intentions. The decision that emerged from the council was predictable but frustrating. They would inform the collective network. They would request a full diplomatic delegation to assess the human threat, and they would ask for military support, just in case. The collective network's response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 18 hours, messages flooded the Quellan Council from every corner of civilized space. Most demanded the humans leave immediately. Several species volunteered to forcibly remove the human warship if the Quellans were too weak to do so themselves. 3 species activated their defense fleets and began moving toward the Outer Veil Nebula. The Torvan Unity responded with particular aggression. Their messages carried barely concealed contempt for Quellen's softness and detailed plans for surrounding the Leviathan with superior firepower. Admiral Kren, commander of the Torvan Third Fleet, transmitted directly to Elder Vix with a simple declaration. "We will eliminate this threat. If your council lacks the courage to act, we will act for you. The humans chose to send warriors into our space. We will show them what real warriors can do." Aboard the Leviathan, Captain Hayes received the diplomatic responses with a sinking heart. Webb had translated more than 200 individual messages, and fewer than 10 suggested anything resembling willingness to communicate. The rest ranged from fearful demands to outright threats. Her command center buzzed with activity as crew members tracked ship movements from multiple species, all converging on their position. 38 ships headed our way, Bennett reported, his voice tight with tension. Torvan fleet leading. They will arrive in approximately 6 days. Multiple weapons platforms. They are not coming to talk. Hayes studied the tactical display. The Leviathan could fight if necessary, probably win against these numbers if they engaged individually. But that would confirm every fear the galaxy held about humanity. It would turn first contact into first blood. Everything they hoped to achieve would die in the flames of battle. "We do not run," she said firmly. "Running makes us look guilty, makes us look weak. We stay here and we keep talking, keep broadcasting our intentions, keep offering transparency." "They are not listening," Bennett argued. "They have already decided we are the enemy." "Then we change their minds." Hayes turned to Webb. "How long until we can get that diplomatic delegation Riv mentioned?" Webb checked his latest translations. "The collective is sending 12 observers, representatives from different species, but they will not arrive for 8 days, 2 days after the Torvan fleet. If shooting starts, the observers will never come. This ends before it begins." The next 4 days were the longest of Hayes' career. She recorded messages in 17 different languages, transmitted them continuously, explaining humanity's intentions over and over. She invited every approaching ship to send observers. She offered complete access to the Leviathan systems and crew. She reminded them that humans had not fired a single shot, had not threatened a single world, had only tried to talk. Most of her messages went unanswered. A few species responded with more questions but refused to approach. The Torvan did not respond at all, simply continued their advance with weapons powered and shields active. On the 5th day, something unexpected happened. A small medical transport from the Hainari Collective broke formation from its regular route and approached the Leviathan. Its captain, a botanist named Sella, transmitted a brief message. "I grow things. I study life. I do not believe in judging species by their weapons. May I come aboard your ship? I would like to see what else you brought besides guns." It was the smallest victory, but Hayes grabbed onto it like a lifeline. "Yes, please, come see us. Judge for yourself." Sella's transport docked 4 hours later. She was tall and plant-like, her skin green and textured like bark, her movements graceful and unhurried. When Bennett escorted her through the ship, she barely glanced at the weapons systems. Instead, she went straight to the hydroponics bay. Engineer Cal Mason was tending the gardens when they arrived. Rows of vegetables and fruits from Earth. Experimental sections trying to cultivate plants from samples collected by probes. Mason had even preserved seeds from multiple worlds, carefully labeled and stored in climate-controlled containers. Sella walked between the growing plants with something like reverence. She touched leaves gently, examined root systems, asked Mason detailed questions about growth cycles and genetic preservation. Finally, she turned to Bennett with an expression he could not read but felt was significant. "A species that preserves other worlds' plant life while traveling does not come to destroy. They come to learn, to understand, maybe even to help." News of Sella's visit spread faster than any official transmission. The Hynari botanist sent her own report to the collective network, describing in detail what she found aboard the Leviathan. Her words carried weight because the Hynari were known for their careful, scientific approach to every question. They did not make emotional decisions. They gathered evidence and drew conclusions based on observable facts. Sella's report changed the tone of some conversations. Not enough to stop the Torvan fleet, but enough that other species began reconsidering their initial reactions. 3 more ships requested permission to approach. Then 5. Then 9. By the time the official diplomatic delegation departed from collective space, they had grown from 12 observers to 23, representing 17 different species. The delegates arrived 6 days after Riv's first contact, traveling in a converted passenger liner escorted by 2 light warships. Hayes stood at the docking bay with her senior staff, knowing this meeting would determine whether humanity's first contact became their last. The delegates emerged slowly, many visibly nervous about entering a human warship. Some wore protective gear despite the atmosphere being safe. Others had armed escorts who gripped their weapons tightly. Hayes decided to try something different. Instead of giving a prepared speech or formal tour, she divided the delegates into small groups and assigned each group a different crew member as a guide. Not officers or trained diplomats, just regular people who worked on the Leviathan. Engineers, scientists, medical staff, teachers from the education department. She wanted the delegates to meet humans, not politicians. A Hynari military observer named Dren found himself paired with Private Lucas Reed, a young maintenance technician barely 22 years old. Dren had come expecting to assess combat readiness and strategic capabilities. Instead, Reed took him to the engineering deck and talked excitedly about the ship's propulsion systems, explaining modifications they had made to improve fuel efficiency and reduce radiation emissions. "We had to make it cleaner," Reed explained, showing Dren readouts on a maintenance console. The original military design did not care about environmental impact, but Captain Hayes said if we are traveling through space that other species use, we should not poison it. So we retrofitted the whole system. Took us 8 months, but now our exhaust is 90% cleaner. Dren studied the technical specifications. The modifications had reduced the ship's combat efficiency slightly. They had sacrificed some power output to make their engines less harmful to space itself. That made no sense if conquest was the goal. Why would conquerors care about environmental protection? In the medical bay, a Quellan physician examined the equipment with Dr. Patricia Howard. The medical technology was advanced but not overwhelmingly superior to what the collective used. However, the philosophy behind it seemed different. Howard showed him trauma treatment protocols that prioritized saving every life, even at great expense and difficulty. "We do not give up on anyone," Howard explained. "If there is any chance of survival, we keep trying. Sometimes we spend weeks treating a single patient who might die anyway. Other species might consider that inefficient, but we believe every individual life matters enough to fight for." The Quellan physician, whose name translated roughly as Swift Healer, noticed something else. The medical bay was enormous, far larger than necessary for the crew size. Howard anticipated his question. "We built it for worst-case scenarios. If we encountered hostility and suffered massive casualties, we needed capacity to treat hundreds at once. But we also hope to use it for other purposes. Medical emergencies among other species. Epidemic response. Disaster relief. The space is here. We want to use it to help, not just to patch up our own wounded." Throughout the ship, similar conversations happened. A Torvan tactical specialist toured the weapons systems with Gunnery Chief Andrew Walsh. Walsh explained their defensive doctrine, which emphasized deterrence and de-escalation. The weapons were powerful but designed to disable rather than destroy when possible. Their tactical AI included protocols for minimizing casualties even during combat. "We can kill," Walsh admitted bluntly. We are very good at it. Humans have practiced warfare for thousands of years, but we are trying to be better than our history. These weapons are our insurance policy. We hope we never have to use them. In the education section, young students attended classes taught by civilian teachers. A delegate from the Lisk Concordat observed a history lesson where the teacher discussed human wars with brutal honesty, showing the costs and consequences without glorification. The students, children of crew members, asked difficult questions about why humans fought each other. The teacher did not give easy answers. She encouraged them to think critically about violence, power, and the choices societies make. The observation that affected delegates most deeply happened by accident. Private Reed was showing Dren the crew quarters when an emergency alarm sounded. A coolant line had ruptured in a maintenance corridor. Reed immediately ran toward the emergency, and Dren followed out of curiosity. What he witnessed changed his entire assessment. The crew response was immediate and coordinated. Engineers arrived within seconds with equipment and containment gear. Medical staff stood ready for injuries. Officers directed the effort without panic. But what struck Dren was the focus on one detail above all others. Reed was trapped on the wrong side of the rupture, exposed to toxic coolant fumes. Captain Hayes herself arrived at the scene within minutes. She coordinated the rescue effort personally, refusing to leave until Reed was safely extracted. She overrode safety protocols that suggested sealing the corridor to protect the rest of the ship. Instead, she risked additional lives to save one maintenance technician. When Reed finally emerged, unconscious but alive, Hayes accompanied him to Medical Bay and waited there while doctors treated him. Dren stood outside Medical Bay for 2 hours, watching through the window. Captain Hayes never left. She stayed while they stabilized Reed. She stayed while they treated his chemical burns. She stayed until he woke up and she could see him breathing on his own. Other delegates drifted to Medical Bay as word spread. They watched the commander of humanity's most powerful warship refuse to leave until she knew her crew member would survive. Swift Healer, the Quellan physician, approached Dren with a thoughtful expression. They watched Hayes finally exit the Medical Bay, exhausted but relieved. "In my species," Swift Healer said quietly, "commanders protect resources. Crew members are valuable but replaceable. This human risks herself and her mission for one individual. This is either foolish or profound. I cannot decide which." Dren had already decided. He had spent his entire career in military service. He understood chain of command and strategic thinking. He knew the calculus of acceptable losses, but he had never seen a commander treat their crew like family. Like each individual life was worth more than all the weapons and armor in the galaxy. "It is both," he answered finally. "Foolish by our standards, profound by theirs, and maybe that is why we should be talking with them instead of fighting them." The Torvan fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel 40,000 kilometers from the Leviathan precisely when their projections predicted. 12 heavy warships, each one a fifth the size of the human vessel but purpose-built for combat. They spread into attack formation immediately, weapons powered, shields at maximum. Admiral Kren transmitted a single message to the Leviathan and to all observers aboard. "Human vessel, you have entered collective space without authorization. You have intimidated peaceful species with your weapons. You will power down your systems and surrender your ship for inspection, or we will disable it by force." Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display. Bennett had already calculated firing solutions for every Torvan ship. Their weapons officers were ready. The Leviathan could probably destroy or disable most of the fleet before taking critical damage, but that path ended with death and war. She needed another option. "Open a channel to Admiral Kren," she ordered. "Direct communication. I want to talk with him personally." The channel opened but showed no video. Just audio, and Kren's voice carried the weight of command and the coldness of someone who had already decided how this would end. "There is nothing to discuss, human. We have heard your lies. We have seen your observers fall for obvious manipulation. We will not be so easily fooled. Power down or be destroyed. Admiral, I have 23 delegates from 17 species aboard my ship right now. If you fire on us, you will be killing representatives of the collective network. Is that truly what the Torvan Unity wants? A pause, then Kren's voice returned, harder than before. They were warned not to board your ship. Their safety is your responsibility, not ours. You use them as shields. This proves your true nature. Hayes felt the trap closing. Any response she gave would sound like excuses. She could not win this argument with words. She needed something else, something that would force Kren to see humans differently. Then an alarm sounded, not on the Leviathan, on every ship in the area. Webb frantically worked his console, translating incoming emergency broadcasts. His face went pale. Captain, we are receiving a distress signal. It is Quellen, a colony transport ship with 3,000 civilians aboard. They had catastrophic engine failure. They are in decaying orbit around the fourth moon of the gas giant. 2 hours until they hit the surface or break apart. Bennett pulled up the location. It is 400,000 kilometers away. The collective ships here cannot reach them in time. We could. The Leviathan has the speed and the equipment. Hayes looked at the Torvan fleet on her display, then at the desperate distress signal. The colony ship's transmission included visual data. She could see cramped compartments full of Quellen families. Children, elderly, ordinary people who had nothing to do with military decisions or first contact. People who were going to die unless someone helped them. Admiral Kren's voice came through again. Do not think this changes anything, human. If you move toward that ship, we will interpret it as an escape attempt. We will fire. Hayes made her decision in less than 3 seconds. All hands, emergency rescue operation. Engineering, give me maximum speed. Medical, prepare to receive 3,000 casualties. Everyone else, prepare tow systems and repair equipment. We have 2 hours to save those people. Captain, Bennett warned, if we turn away from the Torvan fleet, they will take it as weakness. They might fire on our engines. Then they will fire. But I am not letting 3,000 people die because we were too busy posturing for military advantage. Navigator, set course. Maximum acceleration. The Leviathan spun with surprising grace for its enormous size. Its engines flared to full power, and it accelerated away from the standoff, racing toward the dying colony ship. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kren stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human warship had just turned its back on his entire fleet, put itself in the most vulnerable position possible, all to chase a distress signal from people who were not human and did not want humans in their space. Admiral, his weapons officer reported, we have perfect firing solutions. Their engines are exposed. We could cripple them right now. Kren said nothing. He watched the Leviathan grow smaller on his displays, watched it race toward the failing colony ship. His tactical computer provided continuous updates. The humans would arrive with 20 minutes to spare. Maybe, if everything went perfectly. More likely, they would arrive just in time to watch the transport break apart. Sir, do we fire? Kren thought about his orders, about the threat assessment, about 60 years of listening to human broadcasts and preparing for the day they reached the stars. He thought about what his government expected him to do. Then he thought about what he was actually seeing. Hold fire, follow them. I want to see this. The rescue operation was chaos barely controlled by training and desperation. The Leviathan arrived at the colony ship with 18 minutes remaining. The transport was already breaking up, hull plates tearing loose, atmosphere venting into space. 3,000 Quellens crowded into the most stable sections, waiting to die. Hayes coordinated from the bridge while every able crew member worked the rescue. They latched tractor beams onto the transport, stabilizing its tumble. Engineering teams in spacesuits crossed the void between ships, carrying equipment and cutting through damaged sections to reach survivors. The medical bay activated emergency capacity, setting up triage in cargo holds and corridors. Crew members gave up their own quarters, herded frightened Quellan families into safe spaces, offered food and water and comfort to people who moments ago had believed humans were monsters. Cal Mason worked in vacuum for 40 minutes straight, welding critical support structures to hold the transport together just a little longer. His hands shook from exhaustion, but he kept working. Amy Lynn coordinated refugee flow, speaking broken Quellan to scared children, promising them everything would be fine. Dr. Howard worked non-stop in medical, treating injuries and shock, saving lives one at a time. The last survivors came aboard 14 hours after the rescue began. 3,042 Quellans, every single one alive. The transport ship was an empty wreck now, barely holding together, but everyone who had been aboard was safe inside the Leviathan. Hayes finally sat down in her command chair, exhausted beyond measure. Her crew had worked a miracle. On the view screen, the Torvan fleet held position, weapons still powered but not firing. Then Admiral Kren's voice came through, and for the first time it carried something other than hostility. "This is Admiral Kren to Captain Hayes. I am coming aboard your ship. Alone, unarmed, I need to see something." Hours later, Kren walked through the Leviathan's corridors with Bennett as his escort. He saw Quellan families sleeping in crew quarters, saw human engineers sharing their food rations because the refugees needed more than the ship had planned for, saw medical staff still working to treat minor injuries and comfort traumatized children, saw a warship that had transformed itself into a rescue vessel without hesitation. In one corridor, Kren stopped to watch a human child, maybe 7 years old, sitting with a Quellan child of similar age. Neither spoke the other's language, but they were sharing crayons, drawing pictures together, finding the universal language that children always discover. Bennett waited silently while Kren processed what he saw. Finally, the Torvan admiral spoke. "Why did you risk everything for them? They are not your people. They did not welcome you here. Some of them still want you gone. You could have let them die and no one would have blamed you." Bennett considered his answer carefully. "Because they needed help, and we could help, that is enough reason. That is the only reason that matters." Kren studied the children drawing together. He thought about his fleet waiting outside, about the orders he carried, about 60 years of preparation for human arrival. None of it seemed relevant now. "I will report to the Torvan Unity that humanity is not the threat we anticipated, that their greatest weapon is not this ship. It is their unwillingness to let anyone suffer when they have the power to stop it." He turned to face Bennett directly. "We expected conquerors, but you are something more complicated, more dangerous in some ways, because how do we defend against a species that saves their enemies?" Bennett smiled slightly. "You do not defend against us, you talk with us, learn with us, maybe eventually trust us. That is what first contact should be." In the following days, more ships arrived, not to threaten or observe, but to help. Species from across the collective sent supplies, medical equipment, temporary housing. The Leviathan became a meeting place where humans and dozens of alien species worked together, where fear slowly transformed into cautious hope. Riv the merchant visited again, this time as an official Quellan ambassador. He found Captain Hayes in a cargo bay that had been converted into a refugee center. She was helping distribute supplies, no different from any other crew member. "You could have run," Riv said. "When Admiral Kren threatened you, you could have saved your ship and your crew. No one would have blamed you for choosing your own people over ours." Hayes shook her head. "Running would have proven we were what you feared. Staying and helping proved we are what we claimed to be. Words do not build trust. Actions do." She looked around at the cargo bay full of humans and aliens working side by side, at children of different species playing together, at the beginning of something unprecedented. We came here in our biggest warship because that was what we had. But we came here to prove that what we carry inside matters more than what we carry outside. I think we proved that." Riv made a gesture that humans had learned meant agreement in Quellan culture. "Yes. You proved that humanity's true strength is not your ability to destroy. It is your refusal to accept that anyone must be destroyed, even when it would be easier, even when it would be safer, even when it makes no strategic sense." The Leviathan stayed in the outer veil for another 8 months. It became the site of formal first contact talks, cultural exchanges, and the beginning of human integration into the collective network. The warship that the galaxy held its breath over became the place where that breath was finally released in relief. When the Leviathan finally departed for Earth, it traveled with an escort of 50 ships from 20 species. Not guards, companions. The galaxy had held its breath, and then learned to breathe easier knowing that sometimes the biggest weapons carry the kindest hearts.